another video on the Python series. So we're going to be continuing on the previous video, which was on web scraping. And we're going to take that image that I saved as a file, of course, .png file, and we're going to kind of crop it, make it less transparent, more transparent, and also resize it. So in a nutshell, we're just going to work with the image and alter it in various different ways. But before we work and call those attributes, what we need to do as always is import something. So in this case, what we need to do is we need to import the image library. So what we need to write out, of course, as you could see, is from PIL import image. So let's write that out. So from PIL import image. Run that. All right. The next thing we need to do is we need to utilize the .open attribute, and then within that, just pass in the file name as a string. So let me do image.open, and then the file name that I passed in was optinfile.png, and if you watched the previous video, it was Stanford's logo, so we'll see that pop up in just a second. There we go. So as you can see here, the cell actually showed us what that image was, and that was, of course, as I said, Stanford's logo. And then just to make our lives a little bit easier through this process, we'll assign a variable. So just in randomness, I'll just say coolbro is equal to that, because we'll be using coolbro to crop and make the image less transparent. So let's do that. Okay. Now, of course, the very first thing that we'll do is to crop the image, and we'll use a .crop attribute. But before we do that, we want to utilize the dimensions of the image, right? We want to know what the dimensions are in order to cut the image in certain places and in certain areas. So what we need to do first is to use the .size attribute to know those dimensions, right? So let's say, or let's do coolbro.size. There we go. So as you can see here, it was 150 by 150. So those are our dimensions. Now, the next thing we need to do is that when we want to crop this image, we will need to write it in terms of X, Y, W, and H. And W being width and height being, or H being height essentially. And how I'm going to write this out is I'm going to set X equals to 0, Y equals to 0. A reason why I'm using X and why I'm setting it to 0 is that I'm just mentioning or emphasizing that I'm using the origin point of the image to, again, crop it essentially. So the default that you need to do is just set X equal to 0 and Y is equal to 0. And all we need to worry about is the W value, which we can set as 150, right? And then the H value, which is also 150. So the W and H are just the dimensions of the image. Now let's kind of work with this. Let's see how it actually works. So for example, let's just try width is equal to 150. But if I want to crop it, let's say 150 divided by 2, half of the width of the image. And let's just put height as it is, as the dimension of the image. And I need to also, let me add another cell here, insert cell below. So let me call coolbro. Oh, and also, of course, I need to pass in those values because that's how I'm going to be crop essentially. So I'll be doing the coolbro.crop and passing in those values as tuples. So keep in mind that if I just did X, comma Y, comma W, comma H, it would give me an error. So keep in mind that we need to pass it in as tuples. So just add in those extra parentheses in there. There you go. Interesting, right? So we see here that the width is essentially 1/2 and the height is full. We have that full dimension there. That kind of makes sense. So essentially you could see here that the width is half of what it was, but the height is all there. So we have half of the width. Essentially think of the width as, again, the other half of the side or the other side of the image here. So we have all of the height here, correct? That makes sense, but we don't have the other side of the image. So we basically have a semicircle, but the semicircle is built on having the full top to bottom end of the image, but not, of course, the other side, which would have been the width. So that's how we can work with it. We could also do, for example, full width and half of the height. So let's see how that would work. There you go. So you can see here that we have both sides or ends of the image, but we don't have, of course, the bottom half. that is half of the height. So we have all of the width here, but again, not all of the height. So it's half of the height there. And just for fun, let's do 150 over 2, 150 over 2 for both the width and height. And you should get a quarter of the image. There you go. So you get, of course, half of the width. You don't have the full other side of the image, but also you don't even have the full height, or the top, or I should say the bottom end of the image. So kind of neat. You can also try this out for yourself, of course, kind of just work with it and crop it yourself, but it's a very neat image, or a very neat method of cropping, and I think it's really fun to do. I do this endlessly, really. So now let's go on to the dot put alpha, or transparency. And you can see here that I actually wrote image.crop attribute, so we already did that. But of course, as you can see here, we can also utilize the dot put alpha attribute to make the image less or more transparent with a range of 250. So let me show you guys how that would work. So let me say cool bro dot put alpha. Of course, I want to call that. Now the thing here, as I mentioned, it was a range of 250. Now that 250 here just means that that image that we're using will be in full transparency. So let me write this out. Coolbro.put alpha, and I need to put another cell. So let me write coolbro. Okay. So we have the image in full transparency because we put that full value 250 there. That full 250 value just means full transparency. But now if I say 200, you can see it's kind of faded now, right? It is, of course, less transparent. And also, you can see we have a kind of a black background here, and that's because it wants to show us how transparent the image is, so we can discern, when it's less transparent, when it's fully transparent. But now let's try a much lower value. Let's say 100. It is completely faded, as you can see, so of course it is less transparent. It is much less than that 250. And let me show you guys, of course, 250 as full transparency, and there you have it. So it's pretty neat. You can see here that the dot put alpha, of course, associates with the transparency kind of attribute. But in the end, what you're doing is that you're using a certain value to determine the transparency of the image. So 250 is full transparency. Anything less than that, you're going to get the image as less transparent. So keep that in mind. Now, for a bonus part, or the very last part, we're going to just working with the dimensions. We're going to resize the image and make it bigger and smaller. So just as a recap, coolbro.size, our dimensions were 150 and 150, right? In order to make it bigger, for instance, we do coolbro.resize. Let's say, and we need to pass these on tuples as well. So 200 by 400. There you go. So as you can see here, much bigger. It is again just so much more bigger than that previous image. But what if you want to, for example, make it even less bigger, or much smaller than it used to be, even smaller than that previous dimensions that we had? We just write 100 and let's say 50. Yeah, much tinier there, much more smaller, as you could see. So the key here, if you want to resize the image, use that dot resize attribute, and then just kind of alter the original dimensions. These are the, again, original dimensions. If you want to make it bigger, just alter the numbers, making them bigger numbers. If you want to make the image smaller, make those numbers smaller than the 150 and 150, which were, of course, the original dimensions. So that is how you work with images in terms of cropping, transparency, as well as resizing the image, making it smaller and bigger. And I essentially hope you guys enjoy this video. It was a pretty neat lecture in my opinion, pretty neat kind of way to work with images. It's pretty fun, but it's really fun again, guys. It's a really fun way to, or just to kind of work with Python in general. But again, hope you guys enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you, of course, as always, in a future video.